You're watching Raw with Marty Gallagher and JP Bryce on ICTV. Today we're discussing Mark Chaillet, the undisputed king of weight training minimalism. So Mark Chaillet was the most unusual power trainer of all time. Marty, you were his workout partner, training partner for a period of 6 years.
Yep.
And you said his method was deemed as crazy, yet he set all kinds of world records and was an incredible lifter. So kind of elaborate on that.
Well, we should probably back up. Mark came up in Temple Hills, Maryland, and he was a very good athlete. And he got into power training, and he created something called the Shed out back of his parents' house. Mark's dad was a big-time DC cop, Buck Chaillet. So they got this shed thing going, and it was the neighborhood kids from Temple Hills. And out of the shed, 2 future world champions emerged, right? Just from that one little area. One of them was Mark. The other one was Mark Dimmoduck, who was Dimmoduck was from like Nowhereville, Pennsylvania, right? And he became a DC cop. He took the police test and got on the police force. So he was like a 19-year-old rookie cop looking for a place to power train. So he got hooked up with Chaillet at the Shed, right?
Where was the shed?
Out back of Mark's parents' house in Temple Hills.
Okay, so it was literally a shed.
Yeah, like an unheated place that they built. They're all of them are very handy. It was Mark, his brother Ray. Mark had another brother. Mark had a sister. Mark's mom stayed home, and I mean, you know, you have 4 kids. So after the Shed, Mark went on to University of Maryland, and he could have played football there if he had wanted to. And he actually, while he was there, he actually did some work for the CIA, and it was thought that he might have a future there with them. But Mark went to the Collegiate National Championships, and I believe his sophomore year. And on his 3rd attempt deadlift, he was like 130 pounds back going into the deadlift, right? He was being, and it did the 220-pound class. And everyone else was finished. And I think the heaviest deadlift in the 220-pound class was like 733, you know, a damn good deadlift. So Chaillet called for 800 for the win. And, you know, everyone was like, you know, blown away by that. Well, he pulled it. And he got 2 red lights. See, they turned him down, right? So he lost the Collegiate National Championships weighing 220, pulling 800 at, like, I don't know how old he was, 19, right, whatever. Well, Larry Pacifico, the king of powerlifters, happened to be at the Collegiate Nationals, and he saw Chaillet, and he said, God, he said, you're great, you're a great kid. Why don't you come to Dayton, Ohio, and work for me, and, you know, I'll mentor you. I'm the 9-time world champion. I'm the man. And you can become one of my stable of elite lifters. And Larry had, you know, he had like Mike Bridges and Joe Ladnier and, I mean, John Topsaglu, and all these great young lifters were coming to Dayton and working within Larry's empire. And
now his empire included gyms and spas.
Also he was moving equipment. He had his I think it was Power Elite line of, you know, powerlifting gear, you know, belts and wraps and, you know, stuff like that. Suits, I think he had some suits, and I think he did supplements. I can't remember. But anyway, it was enough that there was plenty of work. So he was getting the top guys to come out, and he'd mentor them, and then he'd get them to lift for him on his national team. That would go to like the juniors and the senior national championships. So Mark got drafted. Mark went out there. This was the first indicator of how, what's the word I search for? Forceful Mark was in his ideas. So he goes out and to Dayton, and he gets the job. I think Larry put him to work at the warehouse, packing orders or whatever. And so they get together the first training session, and Larry says, well, all right, well, follow me through, kid. And Mark goes, nah, Larry, that's not what I do. And Larry's like, what? And he said, yeah, he says, I kind of have my own thing. To the 9-time rule. And Larry's like, all right. He said, just as long as you deliver, okay, go your own way. Meanwhile, all the other guys are like trembling in their boots every time Larry comes around.
So really, Larry took it that well because
yeah. Mark was unique. Also, Mark had a very interesting personality. He was a forceful alpha male. He had a huge natural structure. He was built like a silverback gorilla. He had wide shoulders, big 8 1/4 inch wrists, big bones. So he could hang a lot of meat on his structure. And he was 5'9", and big head, big bones, huge hands. His hands looked like they came off some 6'11" basketball player. So he's perfect for the deadlift, right? Because he had grip all day long.
Yeah, just like Ed Cohn.
Yeah, actually, yeah. And Mark also was long-armed, short-legged, which made him really good for squatting and deadlifting, not so good at bench pressing. So he worked with Larry, and then they decided that he was going to come back to Maryland and open a gym dedicated to powerlifting in Temple Hills. And we were like, wow, that's incredible. Yes, do that. We want to do that. We were, myself, Joe Ferry, Marshall Peck, Dan Pinkston, a bunch of other guys. We were training in Cassidy's basement at the time. But we were literally getting too strong for Hughes. Despite being the world champion, Hugh didn't have any Olympic bars. He only had exercise bars, right? Like, he had a 6-foot, like, plain bar, no revolving sleeves. He didn't have any 100-pound plates. He cut his hundreds out of raw steel that had, like, jagged edges and shit. Oh, it was pathetic. It looked like...
But you guys had to hang extra weights, dumbbells, and plates.
Over 650 on the squat, we had to hang, you put a coat hanger that was attached to a dumbbell, and the dumbbells would say, okay, what do you want? I need 685. Okay, well then we got to get 240, whatever it came to, and the bar would whip because you had dumbbells on the end, and it was like you had to time it so at the bottom you were hitting it on the way up. And so when Mark's gym opened, we said, we want to move to Mark's gym, and he was like, you know what, you guys, you should go with my blessings. It's time for you guys to move on. And he was great. He would come over to Mark's place, and Mark's place was so beautiful. He was on the second floor over an auto parts store in a big open place, lots of room with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in tons of light. Not floor-to-ceiling, half windows, but tons of light. It was a beautiful, well-lit, open area, right? And Mark was dedicated to powerlifting. That's all he did. He didn't. If you wanted to be a bodybuilder, well, you could come there, but you would power train, right?
And what did you call that gym?
Oh, that was the most hardcore gym I've ever. That was nirvana for gyms. I mean, that was That was
but you called it the House of Pain.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did, amongst other things.
What was the actual name of it, like Chaillet's Gym or something?
Oh, I don't know, something crazy like health and fitness or, something. And
It was interesting.
We're like, where's the health? Where's the fitness, Mark?
If you read your book, Purposeful Primitive, there's a whole section on Chaillet, and I was reading it the other day to kind of get ready for this. It was interesting how you guys grouped everybody together on the racks. Every training session. They were grouped by strength.
Well, yeah, and the big days were Monday and Thursday. And kickoff was at 4 o'clock. And that was it. If you could make it, well, that's great. If you couldn't, no one cared, right? And it was like, who in the hell can train at 4 o'clock on Monday and Thursday, right? Well, it's either the criminal class or the musicians or, the strange people that are not working real 9-to-5 jobs. They can't do that. Yet, the place was always packed with the best lifters. I think one day I counted 14 guys on a Thursday that had deadlifted 700 or more.
Right.
It's just another Thursday training session.
Now, the guys you had over there, Kirk lifted over there, Don Mills, Joe Ferry, Mark Dimmaduk, Big John Studd.
Yep.
Whole bunch of guys.
On and on it goes. Bob Brandon. Pete Buzzy.
Yeah.
I can name 30 guys that pulled 700 that trained on a periodic basis at Mark's. And Mark was so stubborn, so obstinate, so sure of himself when he's training. And it was all... He explained it to me one time. He said, Marty, what do you do in powerlifting? And I said, well, you tell me, Mark. He said, well, you go into a competition, you're allowed to wear a certain amount of gear, and they judge you on how much you can do. I said, yep, that's it. He said, well, that's the way I train. I'm going to train the squat, the bench press, the deadlift. I'm going to go up to a single rep. I'm going to wear whatever gear they allow, and that's all I'm going to do, and that's it. And I am the king of recovery. I think that recovery is key, that people underestimate recovery. Intensity trumps everything. And, his results, were incredible.
Yeah, and it's, exactly like you said, he trained like he competed, and really that makes a lot of sense. But one thing that a lot of people don't do a lot of, because of the danger involved, is, and he trained up to one all-out rep on any given lift, right?
Well, not really, because, Mark really only got his ass in gear, I would say, 16 weeks before a national or a world championship. All right. The off-season, Mark was not running on the treadmill and doing concentration curls, okay? He was like tanning in the suntan booth, and when Mark decided to get serious, let's say 16 weeks out or 14 weeks out, he would normally be kind of small and flabby. He would be like 255 and not in really good shape. And it's like, all right, well, we got to get in gear here. And you'd work backwards. We said, what do you want to realistically lift at this competition? Oh, and I became his competition coach. He and I hit it off when his gym opened, and for whatever reason, we just got along, and he asked me to be his coach in competition. And he was a national level guy right away. He finished second in the 242-pound class. This was back in the day when there was only one organization, the USPF. There was one national championships and one world championships. Right away, Mark and I, we got second at the nationals, And then for the next 5 years, we rolled at the highest levels. I think the lowest Mark ever finished was third at the Nationals. Right? I mean, he was a power player. We got a lot of national record deadlifts. He got a couple world record deadlifts. You know, Mark was a serious player. But again, he never deviated from this. All I do is I work up to a single rep in the squat and the bench on Monday. That's it. No, I don't do any assistance work. No, I don't do any leg curls. No, I don't do anything else. I'm done. On Thursday, I work up to a single rep in the deadlift. I'm done. I quit. That's it. No, I don't do anything else. Now, the proviso is that on the squat on Monday, he probably worked up to 860 for one. And he probably bench pressed 480 for one. And then on Thursday, he probably deadlifted, I don't know, 810 for one, right? And again, he's still 11 weeks out or something, you know what I mean? He backs up. You go from, if he expects to, let's say, squat 900, bench 520, deadlift 860, then that's your end point. Then each week you back up to your starting point 14 weeks prior. And we use 20 pounds a week in the squat, 15 pounds a week in the deadlift, 10 pounds a week in the bench press. Okay? So if
single all-out rep, that's crazy.
So, well, I mean, if you want to end with a 520-pound bench press, if you work backwards 14 weeks, you get to start with, like, I don't know, what's, 10 pounds minus 110 pounds back, like 400.
Yeah.
You get to jump in, oh, Mark, you're fat and flabby at 255 and you're out of shape. Okay, you got to do 405 for one. Well, he can do that on his worst day with a hangover.
Yeah. Now, that kind of poundage requires, a lot of warm-ups, obviously, to get to that one all-out set for one rep.
Yeah.
But what on your warm-ups, are you still doing one rep, or I would imagine in the
Few as possible. He'd be like, okay, if it's a bench press, 135 for 3, 225 for 3, 275 for 1, 315 for 1, 365 for 1, blah blah blah, 111, and then he's done. But I mean, it's not a quiet library thing. It's a screaming, yelling thing with a lot of revved up other lifters, right? They're on the big platform. There's 5 guys lifting, and somebody might be benching 600 that day. We had a number of guys who benched 600 raw that came through Chaillet's. But that was what was on the menu. If you came to Chaillet's, what we're serving today is singles, right? It's the palace of singles, right? Like, the House of Pancakes or a barbecue. Well, we do powerlifting singles, and man, we had them flocking in. And I tell you, I learned a lot from Mark. He and I deviated, but I'll tell you, there's an art and a science to a single that if you think doing 5 times 5 with 405 is going to give you a 550 squat, you're out of your mind. 550 will cut you in half. You have no idea how heavy that damn 550 is going to be in your back if you've been jerking around with 5 sets of 5 with 405. You put 550 on your back, and it feels like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Yeah. That's the thing the volume guys miss, because they never go to Singleville. Mark Chaillet lived there.
And this is extreme minimalism.
Yes.
You literally couldn't do any less.
And you couldn't get any more muscular or freaky looking than Chaillet. At his peak, he was 285 pounds with veins in his body and athletic as hell and pulling 880 and squatting 1,000. And, I mean, he looked freaky.
There's a good picture of you two guys, and we've got a couple of good Chaillet articles on our website, ironcompany.com. And I think this one was taken, in Hawaii or something?
We were in Maui. That was the greatest powerlifting trip of all time. Me, Chaillet, Ellen, Percy, Doug Furness, Ed Cohn. It was a whole mob scene of partying powerlifters on Maui for a week. Oh my God, that was great. Oh, you bet. And the meet was held. The warm-up area for the meet was held in the sunshine next to the beach, and the meet itself was in a massive open air, luau hut. I mean, it was incredible.
Right. But look at that picture, though, and this is a picture, like I said, of you two guys standing there, and you've got
like
you're on the
86 or something, I'm thinking.
But look how huge he is. He's got like the widest shoulders. He's got a ton of muscle on him. And to think you build that sort of muscle from
singles,
one all-out rep a week, that's crazy.
Well, yeah, but you know what? Your one all-out rep is not 880.
Right. Yeah.
That's the whole game, baby, right there. How big's your one all-out rep,
Right.
But I tell you, I'm not saying that. Look, I think it's just another valid arrow in the training quiver. I don't think it trumps, but I think it's a periodic dose of singles. I think is damn smart.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody can benefit from that because you have to change it around once in a while anyway, and that's about as drastic as you can change it.
Particularly if you've been eating, a fluffy, light diet of 12 rep sets. Nothing will shock your candy ass faster than a bunch of singles.
Now, Mark was not a fan of training, changing the tempo.
Or powerlifting. Or powerlifting. That was his dirty little secret. He didn't really like powerlifting. He just happened to be damn good at it.
Right.
Kenny Fantana was.
From his template, did he?
No, never. Kenny Fantana was like that too. Kenny was the only other guy I met. He was like really great at powerlifting, but he didn't care about powerlifting. Don't talk to him about strategies or personalities. Kenny was like, I don't care, let's play pinochle, And Chaillet was the same way. He just was not just really good at it, but he didn't care to hear your strategies or your ideas. And if you did get him to talk, and he'd be going like, you're overtrained, you need more rest.
Yeah.
Mark had a great cult following at Chaillet's at his gym, but how could you not have a cult following when you had sayings like beer is good for recovery, right? That's how you build a following amongst alpha males, right? And you look like Chaillet and you go, well, goddamn, if Chaillet says beer after a session's okay, well, yeah, let's go, right?
Well, he got results and he won titles and all that, so why not?
Plus, we were ignorant and we didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Right? It was just all empirical, this is what we believe because that's what it felt like. But, I mean, the number of 700-pound pullers that came out of that gym is unbelievable. And again, it was also the vibe. We touched on this earlier. If you would come in and squat or deadlift day, there would be 5 separate platforms going simultaneously, right? Like you walk into the big room, we called it the big room, that's where the real lifting went on, and you'd have squatter deadlift platform 1 where maybe the guys from 0 to 400, that's where they worked. On platform 2 would be like the 400 to 500 pound guys. On platform 3 would be the 5 to 600 pound guys. On platform 4 would be the 6 to 7, and on the big platform would be the 700 plus guys. And on each platform you'd have 4 to 5 to 6 guys rotating in, right? So you got benches along the wall where civilians come and sit to just watch the circus. Yeah.
It was a circus, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh my dude.
Especially afterwards with all that beer.
For recovery, which is good for recovery,
Yeah.
right? But it all worked. It worked, and again, they got bigger, they got better, they pushed themselves. When you train in an environment where you care about the opinions of the people that are watching you, it ups everybody's game, right? If Mark Chaillet, Marty Gallagher, Don Mills, and Marshall Peck are watching you when it's your turn to lift, well, you damn well, you're gonna bring your game. You're gonna bring your best game, and that it worked for everybody.
Look how that parallels prison yard training.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. Same thing.
It's a matter of life and death.
It's
out in
a
the yard. Of course, you've got to make a name for yourself and protect yourself and keep up with these guys. Otherwise, you get your ass kicked in there. So yeah, they've got the motivation to make the gains, irregardless if they had a good diet or not, which they didn't. They had they were eating bologna sandwiches and making great gains, but it's because they were just kicking ass out in the yard.
Well, or ramen noodles. Don't forget ramen noodles. They're great.
So, by the way, what years were you guys training together?
Oh man, I'm thinking like Mark opened that gym in like 80 or 81. It ended, I got a job offer in Milford, Connecticut, so I moved to Connecticut, right, and that was the end of that phase. Shortly thereafter, he moved the gym from over top the auto parts stores over deeper into Suitland, and at that point, we lost track with each other. But I was as close to him at one time. I was closer to him than I was to my own brother, and his family were great. I mean, I used to go stay in their house. And, his dad was incredible. I mean, he was Buck Chaillet was a piece of work. He was a high-level DC cop. They all were. I mean, Mark Dimmodoff was an interesting character. He was a deep cover DC narc, muscled up white boy in the heart of the heroin, shit in 1978, right? It's just like ferocious Wild West stuff, right? So were the guys that were at Chaillet's gym. I mean, I will say this about Chaillet's gym: one of the gym members got their very own episode on Gangland. I'm not going to say who, but we had heavy duty criminals trained there. We also had the elite of the Prince George's and DC Police Force trained there. It was like Rick's Cafe in Casablanca. It was like Rick's Cafe in Casablanca. It was like all bets were off as long as you were in the gym. right? Everything was cool as long as you're in the gym.
Since it's in your book, why don't you want to talk about the gun bin?
No, well, now listen, also I wanted to say this. We're going to get Mark on. We're going to get Mark on. But I wanted to have this first because there was so much information that if we brought him on and we'd get sidetracked in all these episodes, and there's a million of them, trust me, because we went to innumerable national championships together. Sometimes, oh my God, his wedding, that in itself would take 2 hours. Just on and on and on and on. But I wanted to have this time alone to kind of set the table so when we do get him on, if we get sidetracked in some of this other stuff, you have the basics. The guy was important. The guy had this radical approach to strength training, completely valid. Don't dismiss it. There's too much empirical results that's the cheap way out. And again, results speak loudest, don't they?
Yes, they do. All right, so when we have him on, I want to hear some of these stories. You got some crazy stories.
Some of them.
Purposeful, primitive.
Some of them.
Let's talk real quick about, we've talked about his lifting a little bit and some of the weights he was hoisting, but competition lifts, I think his best all-time lifts, and correct me if I'm wrong, he had a 960 squat in competition.
Sounds right.
A 520 bench and an 880 deadlift.
The 880 he didn't get in competition. The best he got in competition was an 860.
860.
Right. I tell you what, when you have to squat 900 pounds before you deadlift, it knocks the hell out of your deadlift. Right. And these guys, when you see these deadlift-only dudes, it's like every time I see one of these guys pull this incredible weight, I want to go, well, you know what? First you need to squat 900, then let's try this again. And that's what was routine back in our day, right? Like, yeah, Chaillet could pull 900, no doubt about it, but not after he had to, wrestle a 940 squat, and then an hour later he's got to pull. And in addition to the 940, he had also done, a 915 and an 885, right?
And he was conventional, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He taught me my conventional. I mean, Hugh and Mark had the same. The way it went was Hugh taught the deadlift style to Dimmaduk. Dimmaduk taught it to Mark. And while I learned it from Cassidy, I really got it from Mark. Mark really taught me how to drive the legs and incorporate the legs to break the bar from the floor. That was huge. And he used to say, Marty, the way we pull, drive the squat up, the deadlift automatically goes up. And I got, yep, you're absolutely right. But only if you have 1,000-pound legs like he had.
Yeah. I've heard you say that many times.
Yeah, got to have the powerhouse legs. If you don't, you compensate by starting your deadlifts with a high hip position.
Now he did, so he liked, I don't know if he did them all the time, you probably know, but deficit deadlifts, he did, would do those on a plate.
He would do that like at Christmas and then at 4th of July, right? And just for shits and giggles.
Just on the holiday.
Yeah, just for shits and giggles. Somebody would throw a 100-pound plate down and say, bet you can't do this. And then he'd do like 845 off the plate, just showing off. There might have even been a little bit of drinking involved.
Now, stiff-legged deadlifts he did with 800 pounds?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No problem.
Oh, my God.
Not that he practiced them, or not that he ever did them, but he could do that. It's only 800, Marty.
The way that you guys, the poundage that you guys lifted back in those days, and you don't have any back problems, and I don't know if he does, but I know he's training
lost all the joints in one side of his body.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, but he stayed too long at the fair, man. We'll talk to him about that, but
okay.
I think he should have hung up his Lipton belt like right at when him and I parted company.
Oh
yeah. He has a whole other phase of his life which is not in sync with my philosophy, but que sera, sera. Again, for many, many years, he was as close to me as my own brother, closer. And he would say the same thing about me. I feel certain.
Mm-hmm.
Not.
Yeah, he's a good dude. So we're already getting guys commenting that they can't wait to have him on because that's when the stories will fly, right? The reminiscing.
You might need a couple of parts for that one, and also we'll need that 30-second delay thing.
The whole thing will be beeps.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be like watching Deadliest Catch or something.
No, we would say the names have been changed to protect the guilty.
Exactly.
All right, so
that's about his list. He did do an IPF legal depth on the 1,000-pound squat in training.
No, that's not true. He did the 1,000 in training. I know it was legal because I called him up on that particular lift. I sat to his right front, knelt down, and when he squatted down to the 1,000 pounds, 2 inches below parallel, I yelled up, and he came up. Now, he went to the IPF World Championships, and I believe he only got 940, but I couldn't go for some crazed reason, and he was not having a good experience. So he ended up taking second to some dude from the Netherlands, and anyway, it was not.
One thing you said about him was he was the greatest competitor at coming from behind and coming out on top.
Two things I would say in closing about Mark, because we don't want to bore these people to death. Number one is it would be frightening for his competitors who didn't know him to have this guy who was 140 pounds behind them at the end of the squat and bench. And, they do their really nice 600-pound deadlift, right? And then this dude opens with 805. And he'd always say to me, he'd turn to me, he'd say, don't tell me shit, just tell me what we need. And after the last lift was done, I'd do the numbers, and I'd say, okay, you need 832 or 815 or whatever it was, and then he'd just go out and do it. And it would be like so much further out than anyone else, but he was just capable of that. Now, he was not the best 275er in the world at that time. He was not in Furness's class. He was not in John Gamble's class. Those guys were up here, but still, he was the best deadlifter in the world, absolutely, for 2 to 3 years in his weight class. And never take that away from him. And again, with these it's like if somebody said, like science says, the bumblebee can't fly. Well, that's Chaillet. They say singles don't work. Well, yes, the hell they don't. Singles do work, buddy. I've seen it up close and personal. And the guy, that single guy at his peak, he would, I'd put his ass up against anybody. He was incredible. At Chaillet's peak, he was unbelievable. Physically, just and athletic, light on his feet. Everything about him was just, bam. He's just extremely athletic. But again, he didn't care. He'd have a giant phone in his ear with a huge antenna, right, walking around in between sets. Mark, get it together. You've got to do 920. Oh yeah. Who is he talking to? I don't know. Right, I'm his coach, right?
He just seem really casual about this stuff, right?
Yes, that's a good way to put it. That is a very. Now I'll tell you what. When it was time to go, like you put, like it's like okay, now it's time to do it. He turned insane. He could rip a man to shreds in that state. When he went into it and they snapped that ammonia capsule under his nose, and only myself or Ray were allowed to do that. Ray was his brother. Big giant guy with a 700
Did he do anything crazy for psyching up, like some guys who get into this?
You should probably want to ask him that.
Oh, okay. We'll ask him that.
Allegedly, but you should ask him.
Okay.
But he was insane. He was an insane psycher. He was your worst nightmare. I mean, I was 18 inches from this guy when he launched, and it was like there was. I could not imagine any human surviving that turned loose on them. I mean, it'd be like being attacked by a rhino or something, you know. I mean, you're like. Right.
You know, it's a good thing guys like him and Karwoski and these guys had an outlet like powerlifting. I mean, if they didn't have that outlet, of course, I guess they wouldn't be the strength giants
It could be.
that they were. But if they couldn't have an outlet for all that rage and anger, I don't know what would have happened.
Well, they make excellent prison gang leaders.
So this sport was an excellent outlet for these guys to get some of that out. I think, thank God they did.
Okay. All right, is that enough? I mean, we've run this one out, baby.
We're going to try to get Mark Chaillet
we'll get him on. We'll get him on.
Reveal some of these other secrets that you talk about in your book, Purposeful Primitive.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, check out Marty's weekly column and podcast, Raw with Marty Gallagher at ironcompany.com. Marty's also available for online training and seminars. You can reach him by going to our athletes page at Iron Company. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, if there's anyone serious out there, that wants to take their game to the next level, we have a limited number of spots, but what we're looking for is highly motivated individuals who have the situation, right? And it's not free, but it's reasonable. It's certainly going to be in line with anything they're paying on a local level to some dink-ass personal trainer who has a certificate from wherever. And we never fail to get results, assuming that, you know, those that we work with do as we ask.
Yeah, based on your experience and who you've worked with and what you've done, you know, with your own
results
career.
Results are a foregone conclusion.
Results, you're going to get results. This is not guessing. This is, proven results, proven techniques and tactics.
Period.
So you definitely get your money's worth. So
all right.
if you're interested, let him know. And then last thing, for all your equipment needs, if you own a gym, a CrossFit box, a school gym or whatever, we can help you out. Give Iron Company a call. We've got all your strength equipment, free weights, cardio, rubber gym flooring, all that. We've got the Kirk bar, the Kirk Karwoski approved power bar. If you're looking for a good power bar, check that one out. It's on our site. In the meantime, that's it. This has been a great little podcast on Mark Chaillet, and hopefully we'll get him on soon.
The one and only.
The one and only, just like Marty Gallagher.
He was great. He was great.